Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of TJ's Thoughts. So, for those of you who don't know, this is my series where I give my thoughts and opinions on web series, television shows, and the like. Up until recently, the first 3 episodes of this has all been about the new web series Future Girl, co-created by Amy Dallin and a crap ton of other people. It was amazing. It was lovely. It's over. So now I'm going to start branching into different things. And luckily for me, March is a massive month for Netflix things coming out. There was Fuller House, there was House of Cards. Next week, Daredevil Season 2 comes out. There was the new Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon movie. I think it was, I can't remember the subtitle, but it was a sequel to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Just tons of stuff that all came out either in March or slightly before, because I can't remember when Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon came out. But anyway, so it's been really, really awesome. So the next few weeks, I'm going to be going over, just kind of giving broad overviews of some of the newer stuff that's come out on Netflix. The first thing that I want to talk about, because it has been a major, major story, and a lot of people have given very, very strong opinions, is Fuller House. Fuller House is the sequel to the late 80s, early 90s television show Full House. It starred Bob Saget, David Coulier, and I can't remember anyone else in the show right now because my brain is shot. But it was a huge success. It defined 90s culture in general. It actually, I can't even remember who it was. Whoever it was that actually ran the show, whichever network it was, actually created an entire programming block around it called TGIF, or Thanks God It's Friday. It was incredibly successful. Fuller House is a sequel to that. It's set roughly about 20 years after the end of Full House, or yeah, I think it's 20 years. I don't know. My brain hurts. And it stars almost the entire original cast, plus some new faces that kind of popped up in the last 20 years. Feelings for this show have been massively divided. There's some people like, oh my God, it's like coming home. And then there have been other people that have been like, this is the worst, horrible, disgusting piece of filth that has ever been put in front of my eyes. I wish to gouge them out with a razor blade. I am very much in the middle. But overall, my personal opinion of the first season was, overall, I enjoyed it. Was it the greatest television that I've ever seen in my life? No. And there are a lot of glaring issues with it that I'm going to go over in a little bit. But overall, the first season, if you enjoyed Full House and you want a very nostalgia feeling, or a nostalgia-filled trip back to the 90s with a few references to selfies and sex thrown in, that's Fuller House, 100%. And if that's what you're looking for, you're really going to enjoy it. If you're looking for an exact carbon copy of Full House, it doesn't exist. And if you're looking for, a truly new, like 2016 style show that is breaking new ground and doing things that no one has ever done before, this is not it. This is rehashing a lot of old subjects and going back to an earlier part of television, which I don't think is a bad thing. So let's kick it off by talking about the pilot episode. The pilot episode is called Our Very First Show Again. If this is the only episode you watch of Fuller House, you are going to hate it. The episode itself is just a massive fan service. Like, that's the entire thing. There is very few, you can't go more than 5 minutes without them throwing something in there simply to get people nostalgic about the old show. They use all of the old catchphrases like "have mercy" and "how rude" and all of that stuff. Like, all the catchphrases that they had in the entire original run of that show are in this first episode. All of them. And that is I understand the reason why they did it. I think it was pulled off really, really poorly. The entire, if you guys remembered what I mentioned in my first episode of TJ's Thoughts, where I talked about what I call Disney acting, um, this first episode is just Disney acting. Um, and again, it's where you kind of just pour extra emotion into a character to put them into weird situations. Unfortunately, none of the situations in the first episode are that weird, and so it just comes off as bad acting. Um, my personal idea on this is if it's just like one character or something, that's an actor's choice. And I could kind of disagree or agree with the actor's choice. When it's an entire cast doing the exact same thing, that is either a director or a producer has decided that that's the way that they want it to work, and that's just a bad decision on their part. The reason I mentioned producers is television shows in general. Movies are the director controls everything. Television shows, the producers are the ones that have the real power. With this being kind of a hybrid movie television show because it's produced by Netflix, I don't know who has the power in this, but that definitely was their decision, and it was the wrong decision. It was really hard to get through the first episode. The other thing about it is it's also the longest episode. It clocks in at about 36 minutes. While the rest of them are all around like 27 to 30 minutes, somewhere in there. Um, it's an extra long episode. It's hard to sit through. It does bring back literally the entire cast besides Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. They decided for whatever reason that they were not going to do Fuller House, and there's a billion different reasons that have been speculated why. I don't think they've ever released an official statement as to what. Excuse me. But they didn't do it. And throughout the series in general, but specifically in this episode, they definitely hang a lantern on it. There's one scene in the opening where they're talking about everyone being back in the old house and everything like that, and they turn and they mention Michelle, and they go, "Oh yeah, she's doing something in New York, running her fashion empire." And they make some mention of, yeah, I can't believe she didn't come here. And then the entire cast just does and looks straight at camera for about 10 seconds. Like it's awkward. It's very, very obvious. And to be perfectly honest, I laughed at that point because they were acknowledging just how campy this first episode was going to be. And I think that was kind of a saving grace. So the first show is borderline unwatchable, depending on how forgiving you are of just really campy acting. However, that being said, one of the greatest aspects of the show in general, and specifically the first episode, they have recreated the set almost to a T. It's eerie how close the set is. Like the couch is the same, the layout is the same, the stairs are the same. Like literally, absolutely everything is identical to the original set, which is phenomenal. From a nostalgia perspective, I was so happy when I saw the Tanners walking around in their house again. It was mind-boggling how quickly I was instantly taken back to being a kid watching Full House on my couch at home. And it was just, that was the thing that really kept me going and wanting to watch the next episode, was the fact that, yes, it's really campy and it's just a massive fan service. But I'm like, you know what? Overall, there's a lot of potential in the show. Candace Cameron Bure, she is doing, of the three of the adult main cast that's there the entire time. She is probably my favorite because she's the most believable in her acting. She really hasn't lost that much since the end of the original show, and I think that she definitely kind of carries the cast. Jodie Sweetin, she overacts a little bit too much, and that's throughout the entire series. She's just not quite as believable. She has a lot of snarky comebacks, which I enjoy, but she delivers them so over the top that they just aren't quite believable. And then I can't remember the actress's name right now, but the woman that plays Kimmy Gibbler is Kimmy Gibbler. Like, that's the most amazing aspect of this, is that they got the characterization of Kimmy Gibbler identical to what it was in the original one. Like, the other two the other two actresses' characters themselves have grown up, they've changed, they've gone through a lot. DJ's husband dies before the series starts, and so she's been through some pretty impressive stuff. Stephanie has gone through some pretty, life-changing stuff, and so those two have matured a lot. Kimmy technically has too. She gets married and divorced and a bunch of other things. She has a kid, but she's still Kimmy Gibbler, 100%. And that was another thing that kind of brought me back. However, the character of Kimmy Gibbler has always been one of those very much over-the-top characters that shouldn't technically exist in the world. Just because there aren't people like that. And while, yes, she had a lot of screen time in the original Full House, because she didn't live there, it was a little bit more believable to have this outside character come in, do crazy shit, and then leave. Now she lives in the house, and there are actually a lot of storylines around her. She's almost unbelievable, but the actress herself does very, very well in that. So the only other thing I have to say about the pilot episode is, oh dear God, Stephanie comes in with a British accent, and it hurt. I study accents, and I've done it for years, and I could barely contain myself, and everybody else hated it. It was the absolute worst thing of the premiere, and I think a lot of people turned it off right then, going, nope, if this is how it's going to be, just no. So I wanted to go really in depth into the first episode, because a lot of people, that's where they stopped. I'm not really going to go into plot or anything for the rest of it. I'm just going to kind of give a broad overall opinion of it. The rest of it, as the season moves on, the actresses start really getting into their characters. The campiness is basically left in the first one. They still have every so often those scenes or those lines where you just sit there going, oh, really? And you're like, okay, that's fine. But they start getting much more believable. They start going through a little bit more mature topics. One of the other things that kind of blew me away, if you're familiar with Full House, especially with like the stuff that Bob Saget did. Bob Saget is an incredibly blue comedian. For those of you who don't know what blue means, blue is a blue comedian, or a blue comedy set is a set that's very raunchy, very offensive, very controversial. That is Bob Saget's comedy. That's what he does. And so in the original Full House, he played this insanely squeaky clean person. And one of the things that some people didn't like about Full House was the fact that bad things never happened to them. Other than the death of his wife before the first episode, bad things never really happened, or really bad things. Like, they went through emotional trouble, but people didn't die. People didn't get sick. Cancer didn't exist. I mean, that was the area of Full House, and that was one of the kind of redeeming qualities of it, because you could watch this show and kind of take yourself out of just the horrible world we lived in and kind of live in their world for a little bit, where, yeah, semi-bad things every so often happened, but it was always fixed by a group hug at the end. Full House has a little bit more. Some of this may be that I just didn't pick it up, or Fuller House, I mean. Some of this may be that I didn't quite pick it up when I was a kid, some of the more racy jokes and stuff like that. But for the most part, Full House, the original series, didn't really deal with sex ever. They didn't deal with alcohol. Like nobody drank anything except, I think, for one episode where Stephanie got peer pressured into drinking, and they talked about how horrible alcohol was, which was a staple of television at the time. Beyond that, like, it didn't happen. Even Uncle Jesse, John Stamos, that's the actor's name. John Stamos plays Uncle Jesse. Even Uncle Jesse, who was a bit of a womanizer, They didn't really talk about him sleeping with any of the girls that he dated or anything like that. It was just, they made out, they did some romantic type stuff. He never had a girl spend the night or anything like that. Like, that just didn't happen. The girls were brought by storks, apparently. In the modern one, they actually have an episode where the three girls go out and get shots. Kimmy and her ex-husband wake up in bed together on a number of occasions. Stephanie makes allusions to sex and getting laid and things like that. Like, this is a very much more modern style of the show, where it does talk about things like alcohol and drugs and things that have become more commonplace. And again, I can understand the thought process behind it, simply because that's part of being an adult in the world today. But some of it felt, I don't know, some of it felt a little bit forced, like they were trying to be edgier than they were in the original series. And so I think some of it just came off as they were like, oh, look, our people are super cool and modern. They have alcohol and have sex and things like that. And the funny thing about it is they'll talk about stuff like that, but they can't swear at all, or even say things like "damn" or "hell." So they censor themselves, and it's a weird combination. The kids themselves are actually pretty good. They're young actors. And again, Disney acting abounds throughout this entire thing. However, they do put them in enough situations where they are kind of a little bit bizarre and a little bit out of the ordinary, to where a lot of the times the Disney acting comes off as natural, if that makes sense. So I have to say, probably my favorite of the actors is Kimmy Gibbler's daughter. Simply because, but for whatever reason, she seems the most believable out of the three kids. The young kid is just always doing, crazy stuff, and he's just 100% Disney acting the entire time. DJ's older son can have his moments of being more realistic and having really good kind of dramatic acting, but it's rare. As much as Kimmy's daughter does do the Disney acting on a fairly regular basis, she seems to be slightly more grounded than the other two. And that might just be her personal acting choices. It might be the director, the producer giving her different direction because she's not part of the family. Who knows? But I think she probably had the strongest performance of the kids, from an acting perspective. The rest of it, there's a subplot of DJ trying to find romance after her husband dies. They bring back Scott, who's played by, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's the voice of Aladdin. They bring him back, and they also introduce another love interest for DJ, and you get to see kind of this love triangle that forms because of them, and I hated it so much. While yes, they did deal with romance and stuff in the original series, they did it so much better, I think. The idea of DJ juggling two different guys and being completely incapable of making a decision as to which one she wanted to pursue, and then kind of pitting them against each other, just didn't work. It didn't seem believable. Her interactions with them didn't seem really believable. It just seemed like they wanted to add kind of, again, another edgier aspect. Like, they would never have, two people, one person dating two different people at the same time, especially not for multiple episodes. Rah, 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 rah. And so I really, really hated that subplot in general. They do resolve it by the end. I won't give away exactly how they resolve it. I hope, beyond all hope, that they don't try and mine this in the second season, which they've already been confirmed for. Beyond that, the cameos from the original cast are actually pretty good. Probably the one that was the most kind of the most campy was David Coulier. Coming back for the first episode that he came back, he just seemed like he was trying too hard. The writing was not very good for his character. They were basically just playing off of the tropes that he used in Full House, whereas the character that he played, Joey Gladstone, had actually a lot of character development over the season, over the entire series, and they kind of threw all of it out and turned him into his season 1 character from Full House, which is very, very shallow, very poorly developed, and it was just a guy that told a ton of jokes. And I wasn't really thrilled about that. By the end of that episode, and the other episodes that he guest starred in, he actually became a little bit more believable of a character. Um, but that's something that this show does a lot of, is that they lean very, very heavily on the tropes from Full House without relying on the character development that happened throughout the entire series. And it kind of feels like a step back. They get rid of it very quickly, and by the time you get to the end of the series, you actually have very believable characters that are fun to watch. But this entire series was very much them getting used to their characters, the writers getting used to the characters, and slowly getting to the point where the final episode was probably, well, not really, because I didn't like the final episode. The second to last episode was probably one of the strongest of this, was definitely the strongest of the series, and was actually very watchable and very enjoyable to watch. My hopes are that season 2, they really stick to creating believable characters, that the actors and actresses make much more believable acting choices, and they get rid of a lot of the Disney acting. Like I said, there is a place for that kind of overemphasis of emotion and things like that. When you put them into situations that would never happen, it makes perfect sense. However, when you put them in normal situations that everybody deals with, and they're still doing that Disney acting, it just seems like they don't know what they're doing. And it's very difficult to watch and very difficult to suspend disbelief at that point. So overall, Fuller House season 1, I enjoyed. There's a lot that needs to be improved, and luckily enough, they got a season 2. So there's a chance for it to improve and turn into a really solid show. It is 100% a callback to 90s family television. Even with the mentions of sex and alcohol and stuff like that, stuff that you generally wouldn't think of in a family situation, it's still very much a family show. It's designed to be something that adults and kids can watch together and kind of enjoy. One of the kind of glaring omissions that I really didn't like is there is no musical soundtrack underneath any of the dialogue. There's just the studio and audience laughing. And that was one of the things that they did in Full House, and a lot of the Miller Boyett production stuff, is when they got to a touching scene, they would add music underneath it, which really kind of helped define the emotions that we're going through and really help the audience connect with it. And they don't have any music in this beyond the intro song and the outro song. That's the entirety of music. And I think that's something that they need to bring back. Music in general is an integral part of storytelling, especially in visual storytelling. Music and things like that significantly help to tell the story, and they've completely thrown them away, and I really want to see them bring that back in season 2. But that's my opinions. If you have your own opinions about the first season of Fuller House, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Like I said, for the next few weeks, I'm going to be talking about Netflix shows that I have been watching that have just come out, to give you guys kind of a do's and don'ts of shows that you should watch and what you should kind of expect from the new stuff coming out. However, if there is something specific that you would like me to talk about on TJ's Thoughts, put it in the comments below, and I will do my very best to watch it and give you my opinions on it. Otherwise, if you like this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of it, please hit the subscribe button. And as always, I actually have, if you'd like to help support me in making stuff like this more often, I do have a Patreon link underneath my in the doobly-doo, where you can go and you can get some extra kind of cool stuff for helping support me making stuff like this. All right, so as always, that's all for me, and I will see you guys probably on Monday for another random vlogging. All right, bye bye.